Episode 145, Fire and Ice, Iceland's toughest foot race with Tom Deakins.
Welcome to the Pursuit of the Perfect Race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in there for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Today I have a real treat for you. We're talking about the Fire and Ice with Tom Deakins. This is a very unique race. I have to be honest when I say I don't know much about this race other than it's a 250-kilometer stage race over multiple days in Iceland. It takes place in the Northern Hemisphere summer, and that's about all I really know. Welcome to the show, Tom. I look forward to learning more about this race, more about you, and more about your endurance background.
Thanks, Terry.
Hey, so what exactly is this race besides just like this 250K stage race in Iceland?
The Fire and Ice Ultramarathon is billed as Iceland's toughest foot race. They say that you can run, walk, or crawl your way to the finish line, and I think they really mean that. It is a 250-kilometer race that is completely self-supported. The only thing that the crew really does for you is set up the tents every day and boil water so you can have something warm to eat.
Wow.
The rest is on you.
And I saw the little documentary on Boundless that's on Amazon Prime, and that looked really interesting because this is like, it looks like it's on the surface of the moon because there's nothing around.
There isn't. The race organizers, Dave Annandale, his wife Joran, and crew, they're the only ones that are allowed to camp in this particular national park in Iceland. The particular areas that we were in are only open a few weeks out of the year. And when I booked my travel, they said that most Icelandic people will never see this part of Iceland.
Wow. So the chances of other human beings being on this particular land in the world is probably pretty slim to none, and you're probably one of the only ones that's ever seen these views.
That's correct.
Wow, that's pretty awesome to actually have that type of perspective on the things that you see.
It's incredible. I never imagined it. I watched Boundless 5 years ago, and I was immediately hooked. Personally, last year did not culminate the way I had planned as far as some of the races due to some health issues. I got angry and signed up for Fire and Ice last August and committed that this was going to happen this year.
Wow. So where do you live at?
I live in Anchorage, Alaska.
Okay. So you're training on almost the same type of weather pattern that Iceland's on?
Not even close.
Not even close. Okay.
Not even close. I had some cold runs here. I had some very cold runs here. A lot of training miles. What I did not anticipate was the terrain, how difficult the terrain was going to be. Every day it was different terrain. And for an August, early September event, I did not expect snow and sleet and 40-mile-an-hour winds.
Wow. Now, as far as the event itself goes, how many days long is this event?
It's 6 days.
6 days. How long in mileage or kilometers are you doing each day?
It depends. So day one is a 36.6 kilometer day, or roughly 23 miles.
Okay.
Day two is a marathon. Day three is a marathon. Day four is 70 kilometers, or a little over 70 kilometers, or a serious ultra marathon at 44 miles. Day five is 24 miles, or 38.9 kilometers, and the last day you would think would be easy, but it's not. It's 19 kilometers and 12 miles, or 12 miles.
Wow. Now, how do you start training for an event like this?
You hire somebody. My coach is Rebecca McKee. She's phenomenal. I've used her before for stage races, for a double marathon in a desert, just different silly, nonsensical events that I come up with. And she has not failed me. For me, it's a good investment. You hire the best that you can afford. You surround yourself with people who inspire. She definitely does that for me. And she put together, I started in January for this particular event. I ran 6 days a week. My longest week was 124.6 miles.
Wow.
And I was in the gym 4 days a week because this is a self-supported run. So I was carrying at least 25 pounds of gear, my sleeping bag, sleeping pad, 6 days worth of food, 2 liters of water, emergency medical equipment, clothes to change into when you're done because what you're wearing obviously needs to dry out so you can do it again the next day.
Wow. Now, what made you want to even do this? I mean, was it just because you got inspired or you wanted a challenge? I mean, you've only been doing endurance sports for 5 years, so you went from the marathon to wanting to do something absolutely crazy like this. Wow.
It is kind of crazy to be honest. Marathons at this point are boring. It's what do you do with the other 3? It takes up 3.5 hours of your day. So what do you do with the rest of it? I tried ultras and they're over in a day. I was telling a friend of mine today that 2 things. I run better when I'm running for a cause versus for myself because I have something or someone or an organization depending on me versus, it's just about me and I can quit if I want to. And if it's somebody else, I can't quit. The other thing is, not to group categories of people, but having, done 5Ks to half marathons to marathons to ultras and now stage racing, there are different people at each level of those races. And I would say by far the people that I've met on multi-day events are very focused. They're very committed on being successful. There seems to be a lot of doctors, a lot of IT professionals, a lot of engineers that are participating, but they're also very humble people, which is, sometimes you see people at a half marathon and, it's how big the medal is and how fast they went in comparison to how fast you went or whatever. I've not noticed on these stage races any of that. It's all about yourself getting to that finish line. And I quickly learned that on day 2. Day 1, I came in, I think, either 15th or 18th on day 1. And day 2, I quickly figured out this is about survival and this is about finishing. No more, no less.
Right. Because not only is this a multi-day event, but the weather is just grueling.
It's relentless.
I think that's even putting it lightly, honestly, because
it was relentless.
Because I'm sure there was a lot of wind in your face for many miles in a row. And you're talking about there's river crossings that the water is absolutely freezing. And
yes.
You have to do, I think there's 4 river crossings.
There's 2 river crossings, and they're on the long day, which was day 4. And I think we're going to get into the breakdown of each day, but within the first 30 kilometers, you have crossed glacial rivers twice.
Wow.
And then you still have another 40 to go.
And did you take your shoes off for these, or what was the plan for this?
I did not. I initially took scuba socks, water socks, and I was going to change out. But when I got there and put all the food in my pack, I ordered my food from a company in England. It's called Extreme Nutrition, and they shipped it and had it labeled day 1 through day 6 for me. Once I put that in my pack, I was surprised at how heavy it was, and I left those shoes behind. I left my poles behind just because I didn't want to carry that extra weight. So I went in with my shoes on, and I figured all the water would squish out within a couple of kilometers, and my feet would eventually warm up.
Wow. So little bit about your training. Were you training for distance? Were you training with time? Were you going off of heart rate? What does your training actually look like going into this?
My training was all about fatigue. It was back-to-back runs, sometimes 2 runs a day. I might have 50 or 60 miles on a weekend, broken up over, I may do 20, 25 miles on Saturday, take a 2-hour break, go out and do more miles, and then do another run on Sunday, and then have Monday off, and then right back into, Tuesday, maybe 17 miles. Whatever Rebecca put on the plan, I'm really good at following directions. It would be a waste of money for me to have invested in somebody of her caliber to put a program together for me and then not follow it. So if it was on my training plan, I executed that training plan.
Wow, so you didn't miss any days of training then?
I had the flu in February, and I travel a lot for work, but I would say that I executed between 90 and 95% of that plan.
Now, if we take a look at your number of hours that you spent training per week, what was the most hours training a week? I know you got up to 105 miles of running, but that doesn't include the strength training and all the stuff you know either. It
doesn't. So I I'm up at 4:45 in the morning. My office has a well-equipped, well-appointed gym in it, and I'm the only one there first thing in the morning. And I work out, grab a shower, and I'm sitting at my desk by 6. In the morning. I work till 2:30, and by 3 or 3:30, I'm pounding the pavement on however many miles is on my particular training plan.
Wow. Now, do you have a spouse as well?
I do not.
So managing the life-work balance, how big of an issue is that?
I have my son's dog. So I have to, and make sure that I'm not neglecting the dog or anything, but I work for the federal government. I am the senior official for an agency, so I oversee all the federal property throughout the state of Alaska. So I have 126 facilities that I travel to, and every other federal agency is essentially one of my tenants. So I have thousands of tenants and millions of square feet of commercial office space, covering 584,000-ish miles. So I'm on the road a lot. I'm on a plane a lot.
Wow, because Alaska's not small by any means.
And you can't drive to most of it.
Man. So if we take a look at your training, knowing how big of an event this is, I'm assuming this is the biggest event you've ever done in your life.
It is.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So being that you haven't done anything of this caliber before, what workouts did you do that gave you the confidence to go into this race saying, okay, I'm ready?
My biggest fear actually was not the miles and not the distance. My biggest fear was carrying that pack. On other previous stage races and even ultra races, just even a hydration pack with a couple of liters of water in it. And I'm not your average built runner. I'm a more muscular runner. I'm not super lean at all. I shouldn't say that. I'm definitely not your runner build, and I don't want to be. So for me, it was important to be able to manage that pack on varying terrain. I will say that, doing a lot of shoulder work, a lot of upper body work, a lot of core work in the gym was critical, and it helped me handle it much better. What I didn't do was incorporate as much time underneath that pack as I should have. In other words, I would go out and run a marathon with a pack on. And my training was, my pack weighed about 20 pounds. My pack, when I got in Iceland and added all that food to it, I think it tapped at 26 pounds. By day 3, my shoulders were sore. My shoulders were in much better shape than other competitors who ended up having to have their backs taped, who had open sores on their shoulders, things like that. But the weight training, the strength training, the core training, I thought was critical. I knew that I could do the distances. I've done, a couple of years ago, I did 20 marathons in 20 weeks for a fundraiser. So I wasn't concerned about the distance. I've done some 70 milers in decent time. I've done some 50 milers in decent time. So I wasn't really concerned about the day after day after day mileage. I was concerned about hauling my house, my sleeping bag, all my required equipment, and the gear check was brutal. If you didn't have it, you didn't go. They wanted to see it and they wanted to touch it and ensure that you had everything that was on that 3-page required packing list. Wow. And they would send you to the store. They did a medical check and a gear check. And if you didn't have it, they said you can walk a mile down the street to an outdoor shop. You can buy it and come back, and then we'll start all over again.
Wow. So just to kind of get an idea of what all you're supposed to have in this pack, what is in this pack?
So I had a 30-liter Raid Light pack because I watched enough of their YouTubes to figure out that everybody seemed to have a Raid Light pack. Raid Light is not a well-known brand here in the States. It's actually, I believe, a French brand, and it is they have one store here, and I believe it's in Utah. So on the packing list, it tells you a backpack or a rucksack, normally 25 to 35 liters, sleeping bag, and they were very specific about the requirements of the sleeping bag. So it had to be rated for -2 degrees Celsius, so something in the 20s. You had to have a waterproof bags to go with it, a sleeping mat, a head torch or headlamp, as well as another emergency light, 12 safety pins, knife, survival bag, flashing red light, to base layers, merino wool, long pants, long tops, waterproof jacket. They were really specific on. Minimum requirements was 10-meter hydrostatic head, or at least a 20-liter hydrostatic head if it was a single layer fabric.
What is all that?
So, yeah, I had to ask the same questions because I didn't know. And luckily, I've got some friends that mountain climb all over the place. So essentially what that is if it's how quickly water will absorb into material. So let me read this a little bit more, and you're going to have some editing to do here. So what this says is a jacket or trousers, tapered seams, waterproof and breathable. Minimum material specifications apply. Minimum material specification is 10-meter hydrostatic head. It must be a 3-layer fabric. If it's a single-layer fabric, it must be at least 2,000-meter hydrostatic head, and all seams must be sealed. So it essentially it's a $400 to $600 rain set, top and bottom. Was about the cheapest that I could find, and I went to a mountain hardware store here, a mountain climbing specific store here that had that equipment. But essentially it relates to how fast the water will absorb into the fabric. And they've had in previous events where people had hypothermia because of one year they had to remove 20 people out of the event because they all had hypothermia on the long day because of freezing rain. Short shoes, obviously, 6 days worth of food, minimum of 2,300 calories per day. And then your dry bag or your emergency bag, you could have anything you wanted in it, at a minimum. Extra warm clothing, another parka. I had 2 parkas, one that I carried and a bigger one in my drop bag. This particular event, this year, they issued the drop bag, the emergency bags, 4 out of the 5 nights. We were out there because of the weather conditions, and they've never done it that many times before.
Wow.
The only thing that you could not have in your drop bag was food. You had to carry all your food.
Wow. So 2,300 calories minimum. How many
Minimum.
calories per day did you carry?
I ordered my food through them, so I had the 2,300 calories, and then I took a lot of nut butter. I wouldn't say a lot of nut butter, but I took some protein cookies, like Lenny and Larry's. So that's about 350 calories in one of those cookies, and I took RX brand nut butters, and they're, I think, about 190 calories in a pack of those. And I would have one of each in addition. So I was under 300 calories a day, and I lost about 8 pounds over the course of this race.
Wow. From the documentary that I saw online, it seems like that they made sure that safety was the highest priority because they have a doctor on staff. They make athletes take the water at every aid station, regardless of if you want it or not. Was that the
Correct.
same feel there?
This crew was phenomenal. We say medics, and I literally thought they were medics. They are not medics. They had 3 fully qualified doctors there. They, most of the people at some point in their life have done multi-day stage racing. When you got to a checkpoint, there was usually a doc there as well as a race crew there, and they are looking at you. They are watching to see how well you're doing. There was a lady there is in one of the YouTube videos. I really admire her. Her name's Danielle. She first year she went, they had the long day the first day, and within the first 7 kilometers, she tripped over a lava rock and broke her leg. She went another 63 kilometers on that broken leg, saying, I'm okay. And I don't know if the docs really understood that she had broken her leg, but that evening, when she had completed 70 kilometers, 63 of which were on a broken leg, they pulled her. So this being the 6th year, I told that story because 6 years into this, there's been more equipment. It's evolved. There's more required equipment just to keep people safe, the warm clothes for the hypothermia. And I said earlier that gear check was brutal. They were turning people away because they didn't have what they needed to have. And this isn't an inexpensive event. It costs a lot of money to participate in this. And
registration fee,
I want to say it was about $3,200.
Wow. $3,200, not counting the equipment.
Correct.
So,
or airfare.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm sure you're familiar with what Ironman is and what it encompasses, but that's usually about $900 on the high end. And then you have a bike and all your gear, but it doesn't, I did not think it would cost this much to do this event. And I'm sure airfare was not cheap.
Airfare, I want to say, was around $1,200. It wasn't, I didn't find it to be that bad. I'm going to do some quick math here.
Okay.
It was over $3,000.
Wow. What does that actually cover? I'm sure it pays for the doctor's time and the race director's effort of putting things together with permits and things like that.
Actually, it's so they rent 4-wheel drive vehicles. They have tents, generators. They have buses. All your transfers. When you landed in Reykjavik airport, you had nothing to do. There was somebody standing there with a sign. They picked you up. They took you to a hotel. You spent the night. The next day, you went to a different airport for an inland flight. They picked you up at the inland flight. They took you to race headquarters. Your lodging was taken care of there. It was a 10-hour bus ride, 4-wheel drive bus ride to get to the starting point.
10-hour bus drive.
Yes, 10-hour bus drive, crossing, foraging rivers to get there. 10 hours just to get to the start. And then they kept the buses on standby just in case the weather really got bad and or somebody needed to be taken to a hospital or something like that. It included the banquet. They had an ocean cruise for the banquet, which was really cool. They've never done that before. I didn't know that I knew that they had film crews out with drones. I didn't realize that they were doing all the videography that they were doing until we were on the boat doing the banquet, and they were looping that. But all the doctors were there on their own. They volunteered to do this.
Wow. So how many people actually participated this year?
So 104 people signed up, 63 showed up, and 59 finished.
103 people signed up,
104 signed up, 63 people showed up, and 59 finished.
Wow.
And I don't think they made a dime on this, to tell you the truth.
Wow.
It was just that well run. I can't say enough about how positive the race crew was. They were incredibly supportive. I never heard them say a negative word, even when they couldn't set up the tents or get them set up fast enough because the weather had deteriorated so badly.
Wow.
They just dealt with it.
So if we take a kind of look at your overall getting there, what day did you leave on to get there? Because the race started on, what would that be, August 27th?
I'm backing up a day here. So I flew on the 23rd of August from Anchorage to Reykjavik. It's a little 6.5 hour flight over the top nonstop. I spent the night in Reykjavik, the 24th. We flew north to Akuri, did all of our gear checks Saturday the 25th, and then Sunday took the bus ride from Akuri to the start of the race, and then the race started on the 27th.
Wow. Did you have an issue with jet lag or anything like that?
I spent Friday. I've been to Reykjavik 4 or 5 times, so I spent I go to Europe a couple times a year for different events, and I usually fly Iceland Air, and you get to stop there, and it's a super nice little walkable city. So I go to my favorite coffee shop or go grab breakfast at a place I know. And I was with some people who had never been there before. So we walked around a little bit, and I kind of took that Friday afternoon to rest and get some sleep. And I think that paid off, and I slept well that night. Saturday night was okay as well. But after that, even though you have plenty of time to sleep, you're sleeping on the ground, and the wind is just relentless. And there was one night, I think it was day 4, the long day. The tents they had an air beam system or an air frame system in the tents, so the tents would give with the wind instead of having metal frames. Well, they gave so well that it's hitting people in the face because the wind is just blowing that hard that everything is coming down on the people, and then it'll bounce back up. But probably, not much more than 3 hours of sleep a day. And we had the opportunity, but you can't get more than that just based on the conditions.
I mean, that almost sounds to me like some of the things that I experienced in Afghanistan in the military. I mean, it was just relentless over there in the wintertime. We were outside sleeping something. It was just daunting.
Yes, it is. And being retired military and sleeping on the back of a tank or in a tank because you can't get out of the weather, you don't get quality of sleep when you're sitting in a commander's hatch. Well, you don't get quality of sleep when you're inside your sleeping bag, which is inside your emergency bag, and you're wearing long pants, a thermal top, a parka, and a hat, all inside your bag, trying to stay warm.
So to kind of put the weather in perspective, I'm assuming the winds probably were gusting up to 50, 60, 70 miles an hour.
I heard the race crew say that they had 40-mile-an-hour winds, specifically on day 3. Day 3 was my worst day. It was just brutal. With 60-mile-an-hour gusts, we had snow and sleet that day as well. But the snow and everything, that started on day 2, actually.
Wow. Now, as far as the temperature of the air, what was the temperature of the air like?
The most I ever heard them say that it was, because they would give us a weather report, the day before we would go out. They would hand us a sheet of paper on what to expect for each stage of this race. The most I heard was +6 Celsius, so that might be 38, 40 degrees somewhere. I don't know the conversion very well. and negative, the coldest without a wind chill, because I have no idea what that was -8 Celsius. So 20 degrees, somewhere in there.
Wow. And then, I mean, I just watched that documentary, and I see that guy wearing shorts, and I'm like, why?
There are a few people that chose to wear shorts. I think there's a few people that regretted wearing shorts. I talked to a gentleman from New York City. He's a personal trainer, an incredible athlete. He and there was a New York City firefighter there as well. Both of them are incredible athletes, and I think most days they chose to wear shorts because they just said their legs don't get cold. Their upper body, they seem to be. They certainly had layers on, but they wore shorts. I actually stopped and took a picture on day 4, the long day, at just after, I think it was checkpoint 3. And I took a picture of the race director, who was wearing 2 parkas and a hat, the doctor, who was kind of like in a snowsuit, and the race director's wife, who had on fleece pants and a parka and a hat.
Wow.
Just to, for my own personal, hey, it is cold out here. If he's got 2 parkas on, I know I'm cold, but it is legitimately cold out.
And they live there?
Actually, they're from the UK.
Oh, really?
Yep. Wow. They're from England.
Wow. So as far as the day before the race, what are you trying to eat as far as nutrition? Are you trying to top up with electrolytes or salt or anything like this? What does this look like from a nutrition standpoint before the race begins?
I actually had a hamburger and French fries and a Diet Coke was my last supper. Rebecca told me throughout the whole thing to drink BCAAs to stay healthy and try not to get sick. And it worked. Matter of fact, I have a bottle of BCAAs right now that I'm sipping on, and I sip on that twice a day. And other than when I initially started this, and one of my training runs, and it was in February, and it was super cold here. It was a 15-degree below day, and I had a 20-mile run to do, and I was out in that, and then I was on a plane, and just my immune system and everything was really worn down, and I got sick. But that was the only time through this 9-month process that I was sick. So I'm a fan of BCAAs, and that's what I use. But prior to the race, I took vitamins, multivitamins, some B12. I had a hamburger, some French fries with my new friend from Germany who had done the Marathon des Sables, and he did a stage race in Cambodia earlier this year. So this was his 3rd that he was doing. And we were roommates that night, and we went for hamburgers and French fries.
Wow. So to give people an idea of the picture here, how old are you?
I'm 54.
54. And what's your height and weight?
I am 5'9" and 173.
Wow. So you need a little bit of calories for sure to maintain through this. What was the hardest part mentally of getting to the start line for you?
I need to keep it simple. The KISS principle is definitely in effect. So I had my training worked out with Rebecca. I had a friend of mine who's a bodybuilder develop a nutrition plan for me, and it was pretty lean. And I think most of your folks that are listening to this or will listen to this are going to say that's insane. But I eat the same thing every day, and it's posted on my refrigerator. And I eat 1,820 calories, and I can tell you exactly what it is. But it's not a ton of calories. But it works for me, and it works well for me. And I don't mind eating the same. I had a goal, and the goal was to compete and finish Fire and Ice. And if that's what it took to do it, I don't care if I eat the same thing every day. So that's what I did.
Okay. Now, the day before the race, how are you doing emotionally? Were you anxious, nervous? Were you kind of on edge? What was this like for you?
I wanted to get off that bus, to tell you the truth. I really wanted, I'd been traveling since Thursday, and it's now Sunday, and I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get this started, and ready for the experience. It's been a 5-year dream for me, and it just seemed to be taking forever. And I can't say that I was anxious. Every time I go into a race and I think, well, I can do 40 miles here in Alaska at this pace, so I'm going to go do a double marathon in the desert, and I think I'm going to be done in whatever time. It never works out like that. Or I'm going to go do a stage race in England, and this is what I think I can do, and I never account for the constant up and down of the hills or the heat or whatever it is. Unfortunately, you would think that I would learn from that, and I don't. I went into Fire and Ice thinking, okay, this is what I think I can do. I'm used to running back-to-back marathons or back-to-back ultras. This should not be a big deal. Immediately after day one, the beginning of day two, this was a big deal. It was not anything like I expected. But the day before, the start, I felt very confident. I was looking at the people around me. I had a 62-year-old grandmother in my tent who finished well. As well as people who do this stuff all over the world, in my tent. And, I felt fairly confident that, no, I'm not going to be up front, but I am going to finish. And, if a 62-year-old grandmother, can do it, certainly, I can do it. So I wasn't nervous. I just wanted to go, and get it out of my system. And the first day really was a good day to get it out of your system, because it all deteriorated after that.
Okay. Now, the day of the race, what time does the race start, and what time did you wake up?
I think day one we started at 8 or 8:30, which I was surprised because in previous years or something that I read, I thought it was a 7 a.m. start. But we had, I want to say it was an 8:30 start that day.
Okay.
They had hot water going by 6 to reconstitute your meals. The meal that I had was oatmeal and berries that I bought through, I should know this company, but I think it's called Extreme Nutrition. I'll look it up here real quick. But it had 800 calories in it, and it was perfect, and it tasted phenomenal, and it worked for me. Everything that I had purchased through them tasted really good. It was calorie dense, and I had no stomach issues, and I didn't try them beforehand. I just went with them, and because it was convenient. But they had hot water at 6 a.m. and race start at 8:30 with a briefing of what the course overview was, and then they let us go.
Okay. Now, where were you sleeping the night before the race? I saw in the video that it was actually in like a little shack. Was this the same thing this year? What was this like?
No. We had 8-man tents or 8-person tents. Each tent was 6 men and 2 women. My tent, I had 2 gentlemen from Switzerland, 1 from Germany, 1 from Spain, 1 from Canada, and 2 women from the UK.
Okay. Now,
so 4 languages in 1 tent.
Okay, so what's the bathroom situation like here?
It depended on where we were camping. So there were some outhouses. They also had porta-johns on a trailer that they towed everywhere with them, depending on the campsite. So a few of the campsites that we were at would have like a ranger station at it, but there were no other people around, but there would be a ranger station, and they had bathrooms there. And I think there were three or 4 nights like that, and 2 nights there were 3 nights like that, and 2 nights that you had to use the porta-johns that were being towed everywhere.
Okay. Because I'm just referencing what I saw in the video, and it was just this portable toilet out in the middle of the field, and that's what you get.
This was 2 back-to-back on a trailer hauled by a 4-wheel drive vehicle.
Wow. So pretty similar.
Pretty similar.
Man. Wow. So you wake up on race day in this tent. How are you feeling after you get your nutrition in and kind of get things going?
It is, you're bound for me, and I'm in the first video a couple of times. I'm trying to stretch a little bit. I'm bouncing up and down. I'm messing around with my hat, pulling it down over my ears. It was cool. It was cold out, and I'm just trying to stay warm. And just a lot of activity, a lot of nervous energy as people are getting started. There was I think the number 1 ultra runner from Taiwan was there. I think there was a ranked runner from Russia, a solid runner from South Africa, and another one from the UK. So there were some serious competitors there, and so there was a lot of energy. And for me, I'm generally a pretty quiet person, so I had my own bouncing up and down that I was doing, but I wasn't moving around a lot. Just doing a little bit of stretching and just trying to stay warm. I think I had 3 layers of clothes on, plus gloves, a hat, and then everything else was in my backpack.
Okay. Now, you don the backpack right before the gun goes off because you don't want to carry it any more than you have to, I'm assuming.
Correct.
What kind of prevention are you doing to heat off any shoulder pain before you get started? Are you taking any Aleve or Advil or anything like that to kind of...
I had Advil with me. I didn't take it initially. When my shoulders really started hurting on day 3, I was taking it and with little effect. They were just sore, and I can explain later why they were so sore. But the first 2 days, the pack felt okay. It was just heavy. But day 3 on, when you really go off road and you're off road for miles and miles and hours in the train, you're going over lava rocks and sand dunes and really rocky terrain and tripping through shrub brushes for miles, and you can't run. It's impossible, really to run in that terrain. The pack is just shifting back and forth and rubbing on your shoulders. And that's what, for me, irritated, especially my left shoulder, the most.
Wow. So right before the gun goes off, there's 63 people that are just huddled around, and this isn't like a big start line like at most marathons. This is we have a little line in the dirt right here, maybe a few flags up saying, hey, this is the actual start line, and it's not a road race, so the start line is on dirt, and you see off in the abyss just nothing. That's what I'm picturing.
Yeah, think the surface of the moon. And we're going to run down the road for, I don't know, maybe 400 or 500 meters, what we had driven up on day 1. And then we're going to take a right, and we're going to start some serious uphill climbs. And then we're going to run along or right next to a glacier for the next, 13 kilometers. And so you're running up and down, these mountains that this glacier had carved for 13 kilometers. It's very rocky. The rocks are very, very sharp. A few people fell, got cut up right away. My tent mate, Maria Russell, who phenomenal athlete, tripped on a rock, and the rock ripped her right shoe, all the way from the right side sole all the way across to the left side, ripped it right open. And it's a self-supported race. So you either have another pair of shoes, you try to fix it, or you can drop. So she taped it for when she got to the first checkpoint, the medics, they taped it for her. It didn't last. But once you come off the mountains on day 1, the next 23 kilometers are pretty much dirt road. And the last little bit of this is through an ancient, a volcano. So you're weaving through a road that was built through what used to be a volcano. But that evening, to finish the story with Maria, I think she used dental floss and a safety pin, and sewed that shoe shut and ran another 230 kilometers with that shoe the way it was. And she finished first woman, and I think in the top 10 overall.
Wow. That's craziness.
Incredible.
So as getting back to the start line here, as the gun's getting ready to go off, or let me rephrase that, as he's about to say start with the stopwatch in hand.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say gun. I'm so used to saying that, but he says go. How is your energy and mindset right then?
I'm thinking I'm at home because I run the mountains all the time. This is exactly what I did yesterday. I needed some time running the mountaintops. So I felt day one was by far my best day. I felt very comfortable. As soon as we rounded the corner and started climbing, I started passing people, and I'm good at going uphill. I'm really good at going uphill. And so I felt very comfortable, even with the weight. I felt very sure-footed on the rock. I had zero issues going around that glacier and coming down. A lot of people chose to take a little bit of time, safety-wise, that they weren't used to running like that. Some people had never seen a glacier before, so they were stopping and taking some photos. But for me, it was finally this has started and I'm in my element. The temperature is fine. I had no issues with it, and the sun was out, so it was a good day.
Wow. Now, as far as day one goes, it's 36.6K or 23 miles.
Mm-hmm.
Were you getting fatigued within this section of it, or were you just feeling strong throughout? What does this look like for you?
I felt strong throughout. I would say maybe there was a photographer is what it was. There was a guy taking some photos, and he said that I had like another 500 meters to go. He was not accurate. It was a lot longer than 500 meters, but the wind had picked up, and the wind coming through what used to be this volcano and around it seemed the more bends in this road through what used to be this volcano, it seemed the faster the wind got and the harder it was to run because you're running into it. It's the only place I've ever been throughout the entire race, but the only country I've ever been that no matter what direction you are headed, the wind is blowing directly into your face. It's a headwind the whole way. But when I got to the end, the wind had really picked up and they were having trouble setting up the tents. It was so bad that they didn't have the tent set up. So they just said, get in any tent that's up to stay warm while they finish putting up the rest. What they ended up having to do was anchor, get a tent up, anchor it with a 4-wheel drive vehicle, rope all the tents in a row and anchor it with another 4-wheel drive vehicle on the other end, and then they could begin the next row. So they would have 3 or 4 tents all roped together, anchored with 4-wheel drive vehicles, and then they would have another row of 3 or 4 tents anchored with vehicles, and then another one just like that.
Wow, that's craziness. Now, whenever you actually started thinking of what you're doing on this big mission by yourself, you had to be really comfortable in your own mind. Like, you have to be okay with that. And how are you doing this mentally?
I'm fortunate enough here in Alaska that I can normally talk somebody into going out on a run with me. Some people will come out for, they might do 15, 20 miles, and then somebody else will pick up and do another however many miles I have to do a particular day. I didn't run with a lot of people during Fire and Ice. I think day 3, my worst day, I spent some time with some people, but that was at the beginning. The way this is broken out, you quickly get separated from everybody else at a start. So you're spending hours and hours and miles on your own.
In really crappy conditions.
Extremely difficult conditions. I can't, people are going to have to watch some of the videos from their public Facebook page or they're going to have to watch Boundless to really understand I live in Alaska and I run in some ridiculous conditions. I don't run in those conditions. This was really challenging for me. But in my head, just to be upfront, I did this because I was trying to fund chemotherapy for some friends. So I thought about their challenge and what they were going through. And that is a lot harder than running a few kilometers in crappy weather. And every time I went to a place where I wasn't happy, or my feet hurt, or there's another blister, or my shoulder is killing me, I thought about, my friends who are dealing with chemo or radiation, or I've got a friend of mine who was telling me about how difficult it was for them to get a PICC line in a few weeks ago. And that's what I thought about. I said earlier, I run much better when I'm running for something other than for myself. That's a very true statement for me. So I just thought about what I was trying to do.
Wow. So that even makes it more ironic that the person that took you to the airport had cancer.
Yeah. How did you know that?
Stalked your Facebook.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was like, yes, they did. The Uber driver was a stage 4 cancer patient, and there was a couple of times throughout the training. July was a lot of miles for me, and I was really getting tired, and I just wanted it to be over. And I got to August, and August I started to taper, and I started to have some free time on my hands, and things were looking up, and I kind of forgot about what I was doing. And then I got in the car with my Uber driver, and it was like, yeah, there's a wake up call. And just a short ride to the airport. How quickly? I mean, I'm 10 minutes from the airport, but you get to know somebody really quick. Superficially anyway, but that was where are you going? What are you doing? Well, I'm going to go run this race. Why are you running this race? I'm trying to fund some chemotherapy for some folks. And he's like, oh, I have stage 4 cancer. And, and it just becomes a thing. But yeah, it's really, really ironic that, that was my ride to the airport.
Wow. So at the conclusion of day 1, how are you feeling overall, mentally and physically?
I'm feeling great. I felt really good. Probably a little overconfident that I finished where I did, and I didn't have any issues physically at that point. What really changed the attitude of everything for me was it started to rain, and the wind just picked up, and it got harder and harder. And I thought that I was, going to be able to get some good rest, which I really got concerned about. I think I finished 18th on day 1, and that was the only day that they showed us the results.
Really?
Yep. As a matter of fact, I just got about 40 minutes before we started this. They just posted the official results for the whole thing.
Okay, because I was actually trying to find that before we got on, and I couldn't find that.
No, they just posted it, and they posted it. It was on the private Facebook site, not on the public one. Okay. Or I didn't look on the public one.
So what was your time at the end of day 1?
Let me pull it up. Day 1, 4 hours and 20 minutes, 40 seconds.
Wow. 4 hours, 20 minutes.
And 40 seconds.
Wow. And that's for 23 miles. I mean, I'm assuming if you could just go and run 1 mile on its own, you'd probably average around 6:30, 7 minutes mile, pretty easy. And that's just due to the technical terrain that's what slowed you down so much.
That and an extra 25 pounds on my back.
Right. Going
up and down mountain.
Right. So did you have any blisters or any?
Did not.
No blisters, no issues with your pack, nothing?
Nothing. I felt very good, very confident at the end of day 1. Day 2, or that night of day 1, the beginning of day 2, it was, I can't emphasize the wind enough, and how windy it was. It's so hard to sleep, even with earplugs in. You can't sleep with your whole tent moving. And then it rained, and then it snowed. So I woke up on day 2 to a fresh layer of snow on the ground, and still maybe half an inch, but it's still August, and it was still windy, and you just came out of your sleeping bag. Of course, the snow that was on the tent melted, plus the condensation inside the tent. So you were dripped on. So maybe 2 or 3 hours of sleep overall, even though I was probably laying down for a solid 6 to 8 hours. But the lack of sleep started for me on day 2, became a concern, because I didn't know if this continued, how I would do on just a couple of hours of sleep every day.
Right.
And
were you able to warm up though?
Just by so I shoved all the clothes that I was going to wear that day inside my sleeping bag so that they were a little bit warm when I got dressed, an old army trick that we learned. And but it was the first day I whipped out that very expensive waterproof jacket, breathable waterproof jacket, and put that on to kind of block the wind. But once I started running, I wasn't cold. It was the waiting around, going out, getting some hot water, coming back, eating your meal, rolling up your sleeping bag, your sleeping pad, putting everything back in your rucksack or your backpack, trying to get it to fit, going to the bathroom one last time, just the back and forth, trying to get ready for, I don't remember what time of day, probably 8 o'clock again, 8:30 start for day 2. But, you're moving, but it is cold. There's just so much activity that you're trying to do. You're trying to adjust the weight. So, I just ate day 1's food and a portion of day 2. So let me adjust and make the right side as even as the left side of my pack as I can. Just doing those simple things, trying to make it a little bit easier.
Now, whenever you got up in the middle of the night, were you able to see any of the northern lights?
No, because of the weather, because I don't really recall. I think day 4 may have been the end of day 4, beginning of day 5 was a clear night. But I didn't see any northern lights.
Okay. Because I know Iceland's really known for
they are
of the northern lights there.
And the crew said that they would wake people up if they wanted to see the northern lights, because they stayed up until the last folks came in, and they had their own tasks that they needed to get done. That crew worked as hard or harder than the runners, because they marked that course every day, and then they had to go pull those flags every day out of there, because the national park that we were in, the Icelandic government, you're not allowed to move a rock.
Really?
Nope, you cannot move a rock to set up a tent. So they're picking places where they can get everything together as much as possible. And if we weren't allowed to walk in a particular area, they would circle it off with flags or whatever, so that we wouldn't disturb anything, so that they could come back next year and do it again.
Wow. I didn't realize that they were actually going out before the race, setting it up with I know there's little markers, but I didn't realize they were going out that day before and putting them out and then taking them up behind the last person. So
they tried to get them out a week before, but the weather had deteriorated, that it knocked a lot of the flags and things like that down. So you had a crew that would go out before everybody and ensure that they're set, that the course is set for that day. And then they'd have sweepers in the evening after the last runner picking everything up.
Wow. So day 2 is 42 kilometers, a full marathon, very windy, snow on the ground, and it started sleeting there towards the end of this day, right?
It did.
Okay, so how was your mental game during this marathon?
Day 2, this became about finishing. Okay, I finished 18th. I did it in 4:20 or whatever the time was. Day 1, I was done being cocky on day 2. Day two, I literally quickly realized this is about finishing. It's an individual thing. It's not about, my buddy from Germany or my buddy from Canada or, the ladies or whatever. This is about getting through this. It was my first, I want to, into the ash field. So day two was essentially 4-wheel drive roads. The course for day two wasn't bad. It was really the weather. But the last probably 2/3 of the race anyway, the landscape really shifted. It was all lava ash. And so it's really kind of comfortable to run on, except you're sinking in it. So it's really like running on a sandy beach and you're going down a couple of inches, and they had marked where you could go all the way down to your knee. So they tried to mark those places because, of course, the guys who were out setting the trail, they found some of those places, and when you went by, you could see how far they sunk down. But most of day two, you were running on old lava ash, and it was kind of spongy. It's really quite pleasant to run on, except you sink.
Wow. So was this lava ash warm? Was it hot?
No. It was neither. It's just like a layering of crust on top of the earth. I have some pictures of it, but it was almost spongy to run on. There was a lot of give to it. I didn't sink. I wore gaiters every day, which was smart. It wasn't on the required list, but I took them, and I probably went to the top of my gaiters.
Now, as far
some
as
areas.
your nutrition plan during each run, were you trying to hit a certain number of calories, like gels or goos or anything like this during the runs, or was it just straight water?
I would have that 800 calorie breakfast when I left. At each checkpoint, I would either have the peanut butter that I took or a portion of that Lenny and Larry's cookie that I took, and I would so checkpoint 1, I would have peanut butter. Checkpoint 2, I would have half of that Lenny and Larry's. Checkpoint 3, I would have the other half of the Lenny and Larry's in the meal packs. And the company is Extreme Adventure Food. They packaged it all up. So you had your breakfast, your dinner, you had a Cliff Bar, and you had shot blocks in there, and then there was a recovery drink that had calories in there for when you were done. So I would have the shot blocks. I never ate the Cliff Bar until I was back in the tent. That was kind of like dessert or something. What I did start doing is also they had instant coffee and tea that came in that package for each day. There's no way to keep your water warm. So it was iced tea and iced coffee. So I would have 2 liters of either iced tea or iced coffee in one, and then just water in the other. I don't do, my electrolytes are just a tablet.
Okay. So at the end of day 2, did you get any blisters or cramping or GI issues or anything like this?
I did not. I had no GI issues the entire time. Day 3 was the first onset of a blister.
Well, I would say that's pretty good considering the conditions. During day 2, did you enter into any dark places mentally?
Day 2, no. Day 2 felt good. We didn't have toilets or anything like that on day 2. An inconvenience. The weather, the snow, the wind, but even with all that, day 2 was fine, and I think it was fine because I was very comfortable on a dirt road. Because here in Alaska, I run on the tank trails on the base. So the dirt road was fine. And when I went off-road into the lava ash, it slowed me down some, but it was comfortable. It wasn't, the pack felt okay. It wasn't moving around as much as it was going to be in the other stages of the race. But there was no reason to really go into or I didn't go into a particularly dark place. I just knew that whatever time I had set in my head for finishing, or whatever placement that I had hoped to finish, all of that became irrelevant just because of the conditions. Because the conditions, not only the weather conditions, but the terrain was very different from day one. And I just started to realize that each day was going to be different terrain, different weather, and I just needed to focus on finishing.
Okay. Now, on day 2, what was the actual weather temperature?
Day 2, I would say it was pretty close, but it was probably maybe 30 degrees or right around freezing most of the day, because it was snowing when we started, and it probably 30-mile-an-hour winds easily.
So what am I not asking? I feel like there's something that I'm not asking about that we're leaving out. What am I leaving out?
With regard to day 2?
Yeah. Anything.
Or just overall?
Yeah, overall, day 2, anything.
I don't know. So they gave us these race notes every day of what the different stages are. So I'm looking at these. So for example, day 2 is 4-wheel drive road is what we're running on for 13.7 kilometers. It's going to open up into plains of ash and rock with some short sections leaving the track. Distant views of Aska volcano and the Queen, which is the largest mountain around that you can see forever. From checkpoint 2, you're going to continue along the track, then head left towards the river. The landscape beneath your feet is going to change again once you arrive at checkpoint 2. Checkpoint 3, 4-wheel drive track. You're going to head across country into the ash and rock fields. So these rock fields were not the lava rock fields. These were just big boulders and other rock. I've never seen so many rocks in all my life, but they're everywhere, and it makes it really hard to run through, but you can navigate it pretty well. But yeah, day 2 is just ash fields and dirt roads with a little bit of rocky places, and then the weather.
So day 3, how does day 3 start for you?
Day 3, not well.
Really?
Day 3, another lack of sleep, just another couple of hours of sleep. And the wind is still blowing. It is now sleeting out. It warmed up a little bit, but that's going to change, and it's going to go straight to snow here in a little while. But it was just cold. I didn't get a good night's sleep. My shoulder's starting to hurt a little bit, but not as much as it's going to by the end of day 3. So day 3, marathon, and same routine in the morning. You get up, you eat, you pack all your stuff, shift the weight around to make it as even as possible, and then you go. And it's immediately you're going across country. And the wind was blowing so hard and right into my face that I wasn't looking up very much. I was just trying to follow the flags that weren't that far apart. And at one point, I was able to look up, and I saw a lone peak, a lone mountain right out in front of me. And you said I could cuss. But the word that I went through my head when I saw that, I'm not going to repeat, but there's this huge mountain, and I can see people going up the side of this mountain. And I was like, there's no freaking way that they have us going up this mountain in the middle of nowhere. And they absolutely did. And it was one heck of a climb. In the first, 15 kilometers, it was across some of that loose ash again, which was hard. It's comfortable to run in, but hard to run in. And then right up the side of this mountain to the top. And the wind is whipping. That particular day, it was 40-mile-an-hour winds with up to 60-mile-an-hour gusts. And now you're standing on a top of a mountain, and you got to go down. And we were going to spend the better part of the day going around what's called the Queen. And the Queen is the largest mountain, snow-covered, that's out there. And once I got down the backside of that mountain, the sleet had changed to snow. And for me, that's probably, if I went to a dark place, that was the day that I went to a dark place. And it was probably right there. Once I got off that mountain and realized that there is no reason to push today because I have an ultra marathon that I have to run tomorrow. I have a 70-kilometer day tomorrow. So I better have some reserves in the bank because I'm not well rested. I wasn't hungry, so I wasn't worried about my nutrition. But it was, I don't care if I walk a little bit today. There is no reason to run headfirst into this wind that's whipping at 40 miles an hour and try to make up some remarkable time or, whatever. It was just get through this day. And again, it didn't matter what direction you were going. The wind was hitting you straight on. And once I got around the mountain, it was my first introduction to the lava fields. Wow. And that was brutal. The lava rocks are sharp. The lava, however it solidified, it's not flat. So it's undulating, it's uneven. You're having to walk on it. Some of it will break away. Some of it won't break away when you step on it. And this is where my pack really became an issue for me. It was the constant moving up and down and side to side, and the shifting of that pack just started to rub my shoulders pretty raw. It just incredibly sore. So I'm moving. I'm got my hands behind my back. I'm trying to lift the pack up off my shoulders to give them a break. And it was just nonstop for the better part of, 25 kilometers like that. 25 kilometers like that.
Wow. That's, man, like for me, thinking of that would just be just brutal because it's freezing cold, it's snowing, the wind is in your face, and now you're having to basically cover all this distance. And could you see anybody if you looked in front of you? Could you see anybody?
I had one guy in front of me who I don't know what country. There was people there from 22 different countries. I don't know where he was from. He was from Europe. But he just had a shuffle, and I passed him walking. But, for him, it was a jog, and I really don't know how he got in front of me to begin with. But he was the only guy that I could see when it was really crappy conditions and going around the Queen. In the lava fields, I couldn't see anybody. There was nobody in front of me. I don't believe that I got past in the lava fields that day. But it seemed you just couldn't make any headway getting through them, especially when you were walking. But no matter how I tried to position that pack, there was nobody to talk to. So, but no matter how I tried to position that pack, I just couldn't get it to where it was comfortable. I had it, my thumbs through the shoulder straps, trying to pull it off or tuck it into my back. I adjusted the waist strap. I held it from behind, trying to keep it off my shoulders. But just the constant shifting because of the terrain under your feet, there was nothing you could do about it.
So how are you dealing with this wind for so many hours in a row?
There really is no way to deal with it. The only thing that I kept telling myself, don't look backwards because you're not going that way, and don't stop. Just keep moving forward. You're eventually going to get there. And I literally kept telling myself that. Be it if you're walking or if you're running, it doesn't matter as long as you keep moving forward. I knew, and I've said this numerous times, that, day 3 was my worst day, and I was okay with day 3 being my worst day because I knew that I had a 70-kilometer run to do tomorrow. I didn't know what the terrain was going to be like, but I kind of assumed it was going to be more of the same. But I just wanted to my shoulders hurt so bad, I just wanted to get to the end of that particular day, and I wanted to get that pack off my back. And in that particular camp, we had running water and we had a flushing toilet. And there was a cold stream if people wanted to put their feet in the water or something like that. But the wind, there was no way to deal with that wind other than just keep fighting it. Just keep moving forward, regardless of how you were moving.
Wow. Tom, I've talked to nearly 150 athletes about their races, ranging from the Olympic distance triathlon all the way to what you're doing now. And I've talked to professional triathletes that do this stuff to win. I've talked to age groupers, and the mental fortitude that you have is on a different level. Like, it's something that I have not encountered yet, because there are plenty of athletes that I have interviewed, myself included. I would be probably crying my eyes out going, oh my God, can this shit get over yet? And you're over here just sucking it up buttercup and just moving right along.
Yes, I will tell you, and Rebecca would tell you too, that I've had that roller coaster of emotions after I finished it. I have been all over the emotional scale since finishing this. However, while I was doing it, it was just finish. I wasn't upset. I didn't cuss. I would have really liked to have figured out, how could I have trained differently so this pack wouldn't hurt as much as it hurt. The blisters I could deal with. And I think I had 5 blisters. I still have some Band-Aids on some because they're still a little raw. But it was all about finishing. But since finishing, I've been all over the scale with this one.
So
no lie.
Day 4, the long day of 70 kilometers, 44 miles. What was the weather like on this day?
So the weather on day 4, I was slow on day 3, and day 4, the weather, believe it or not, they had yellow storm warnings going through.
What is this?
Our system, we have red, amber, green. When you see a storm going through, so yellow is warning. It's going to deteriorate even more. And because, we had some people that walked the whole thing to some slower runners. So based on the times that people came in on day 3, there was a 5:30 a.m. start and there was a 7:30 start on day 4. And day 3, I was slow because I wasn't going to fight that wind. I was just going to get through it. I had a 5:30 start. And trying to remember, it was windy, but I don't think... It was just windy. It wasn't snowing anymore. The snow finally stopped. So, some sunshine, it was cold. It was probably in the 20s, but it wasn't bad weather. So I had a 5:30 start, sunrise, and the first 30 kilometers was dirt roads with 2 river crossings. And I was the 3rd person through both river crossings. I had 2 Belgian doctors in front of me, and we flip-flopped that entire day. Either I was leading or they were leading the whole way. But I just hit the rivers. They're glacial fed, so the water is super cold. I just went in with my shoes and my socks. They had a rope up. They had drones up because they had a film crew, and they had people on both sides. And I didn't want to waste the time with my shoes, and I was just going to get wet again anyway. So, and I didn't know how big the rocks or how sharp the rocks were in there, so I just kept my shoes on. And within a kilometer or 2, all the water was out, and I was creating enough heat running that, my feet never got cold. So the first river crossing was within the first 10 miles or 10 kilometers. And then the second one was, about, I want to say 20 kilometers in, or right around, another 10 kilometers down. The first one was knee deep. And the other one was pretty shallow. It was over my running shoes, but, it wasn't knee deep and trying to get through, but it was a lot longer of a distance to cross. And then it was dirt roads.
So what kind of shoes are you using?
I had Hoka Torrents is what I ended up using, and that I'm not normally a fan of the Hokas. I've had them before, but I had used them in training here. They did really well. I did a mountain race in July. Rebecca gave me a play day. They have a race here at Alyeska called Cirque. Alyeska is our local ski area, so it's sea level to 4,000 feet across the ridgeline and back down in under 6 miles. And I wore those, and there was enough of aggressive grip to slow me down on the downhill, and everything felt really comfortable. So that's what I took to Iceland with me. After the first 30 kilometers, day 4, it was into what's called Little Sahara. Little Sahara is nothing but lava rock.
Really?
And it was right back in it for 20 kilometers. And
so all black. All you can see is black is what I'm picturing.
All black. And I either saw the 2 Belgians in front of me. I did, just prior to entering the Little Sahara, get passed by the Taiwanese runner, the Brit, and the Russian runner, the top 3 runners that were there. And then once I got into Little Sahara, I started having, the issues with the pack again because of the constant shifting. And it's, even those runners, they're not running, they're moving faster than I am, but they're not moving that much faster than I am across the lava rocks. They significantly made up their time in other areas, especially on the dirt roads they were flying. But they also, weigh a lot less than I do too. But Little Sahara, 20 kilometers of going through that. Just prior to coming out of Little Sahara, you're like in a little oasis area. There's a stream, it's green, and it starts to change to sand and sand dunes a little bit. And then you have to climb out of this little valley. It's called a hidden valley. And you climb out of it, and it's pretty rocky. And you come up to the top, and there's a checkpoint there, and it's on a dirt road. And it's like, thank God I get to run again. And there's a doctor there. They check you out. And the guy who checked my gear, and I called him Mr. Relentless, he was thorough. He's a good guy, Alan. He filled up my water bottles and pointed back off road. And I wanted to lose it. At that point, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And he's like, no, follow the flags, off road, another 20 kilometers. And I just wanted to cry. So we're back off road, but I'm not in the lava rocks anymore. Now I'm in ash fields and sand dunes. And it's up and down and up and down, these things for miles. And then the sand dunes give way to little shrub brushes, like blueberry bushes, about ankle high, maybe somewhere between your ankle and your knee. Again, it's impossible to run through. And if you think of a farmer's field where they plow it, and so you've got these big, deep rows of plowed earth, but they forgot to disc it, so they didn't level it out. So you're trying to stay on top of these mounds as you go, and you get really pissed off when you fall off of one of these mounds, and you got to climb back up onto them, and you're almost jumping from mound to mound to mound, but your feet are getting tripped up by these bushes. So I had the sand dunes, the ash fields, and these bushes for the next 20 kilometers to finish off that day.
In freezing conditions with the wind.
With the wind, and this is where I came out of that with 4 blisters because I had run through those 2 river crossings with my shoes on, and then the lava field. So I had 4 decent blisters at that point, my shoulders screaming, and I was happy for the first 30 kilometers. I was not happy at all the last 40 because of the terrain.
Wow. So at the end of day 4. You complete the 70 kilometers. What does the finish line at the day 4 look like? What is this picture? Put this into
put it into perspective, huh?
Perspective for me. What does that look like?
Well, they have so. My goal for day 4 was I wanted to finish in under 12 hours. I did not want to be out there at night. No way did I want to be out there at night. And like I said, I had a 5:30 start. I finished in right around 11 hours. And so I was a happy guy. I wasn't when I crossed the finish line. They had some drones up, and I really just wanted to look at the drone and flip it off. But because they had the crews out there and they were filming, they had phenomenal camera crews out there. But the race director's there, his wife's there. It's just a banner across this little road. And, Jorn, I can't tell you how many times she'd yell, "Well done, Tom, well done." And, Dave shakes your hand. The race director shakes your hand. They intimately know every competitor. How are you feeling? Did you see so-and-so? We heard that they were struggling. Did you check on anybody? They're very concerned, about everyone. They know you. The medics are there. And they literally stay there until the last person comes in, or they put the drones up and they start to go out and find people. And, if they're not in after midnight, then they go hunting, for wherever these guys are on the course.
Wow.
But I didn't see them because I got in maybe by 4:30 that afternoon, and I don't recall seeing them move from that finish line, that banner, all night long. They were still there at night when I got up to use the restroom. They were still there.
Standing outside in the cold.
Outside in the cold, 2 parkas, hat, gloves. They had a 4-wheel drive vehicle there that, they would get in and out of as each individual came in. And it's not like groups of people are coming in. Somebody might come in and 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later, an hour later, whatever, somebody else will come in. You're not coming in groups at all. Two of my tent mates passed me that day when we were in what was called the Hidden Valley. But for the most part, I really didn't see a lot of people.
What was it like whenever somebody that you knew would pass you? Would they just say, "Hey, are you okay?" Was it a good, tight camaraderie? Good, tight camaraderie.
You doing okay? You need anything? Really, everybody was not only concerned about their own performance, everybody literally wanted each participant to do well. I made good friends. I seriously met some people that I admire, that I respect, that the things that they do blow my mind. But when I said earlier, little 5K or a little, half marathon or a marathon, you've got these people that are out there and they're uber competitive and whatever. The multi-day ultra runner stage race folks, they're competing with themselves, but they genuinely care about each and every other person. I've done Chicago with 43,000 other people. I didn't talk to anybody at Chicago. I've done the Nike. Didn't talk to anybody at the Nike either. There, though, in Iceland or England or wherever I've done these things, it's how you doing, little conversation. You might run with somebody for a while, and then they'll take off or you'll take off. You'll just get into we call it Maria calls it, I get into ultra mode, and it's just the same pace and you just go. And, but every one of them, if I pass them or they pass me, we would stop and check in on and make sure. We might run together for a little while. We might walk together. If it was on lava rocks, we may have walked together for a little while. There was another competitor from Alaska there, Wendy, who I didn't know until I got there. We walked a little bit on day 3. There was, again, day 3 with that wind and that weather, there was no point in wasting the energy. I just walked with her for a while. I walked with another guy from Canada for a while, Gip. And he's done the Marathon Disables, and he's done 4 deserts and things like that. And, we walked together, and I have a lot of respect for him and the races that he has competed. It was no shame in it. That's for sure.
Wow. So you get done with day 4, you go into a little shack to warm up, or do you go into a tent and sleep?
Tent, try to sleep, so you got to unpack your gear, lay it all out, change out of your wet clothes, put on something dry, try to dry your wet clothes because you got to wear those again tomorrow, with the few hours of remaining daylight that you have. Get something to eat. Andy Annandale, Dave's brother, what a great guy, great attitude. He always ensured he would ask me, do you have a reservation, for dinner? And it's like, I'm just getting hot water, but every day he's like, well, I'll make sure you have breakfast reservations and stuff. It was, he made it so much fun. But you just unpack all your gear. You check yourself out. If you need to go see the docks, you go see the docks. You get some chow and you try to rest as best you can. But then one of your tent mates come in because they might be a little bit slower. You talk to somebody who is faster, and and I have an amazing amount of respect for. We had 2 guys from Switzerland in there, and one of them, he would come in, he'd finish later every day. He would come in, he'd drop his pack, eat something, go to sleep, get up, put his pack on, and go. Little time to do anything else in between. And he did that day after day after day after day. And he finished, and he's got some bragging rights. But I think, when you're out there 15, 16, 20 hours, whatever it might be, and I was done in 11 hours, you develop a whole different appreciation for, I was out there for 11, he was out there for 18. How hard was he working? A lot harder than I was. Right. So, yeah.
Now, the start of day 5, after the 70K, you haven't showered in about a week at this point.
That's correct.
Now that hopefully you brought your toothbrush at least. But
I did.
Now you're starting day 5 of this. You have 24 miles to go this day. The wind is still relentless, still freezing cold outside, and you have to go and quote-unquote run 24 miles.
Dude.
Not only are you fatigued, drained, sleep-deprived, and now you're having to battle these tough conditions. What was it like getting to the start line after you put your pack on with your bad shoulder, getting up there with 5 blisters on your feet and going, oh my gosh, I have to get through 24 more miles in this crap?
And it was crap. The first 13 kilometers was, I just could not believe we were right back into, we were going over what they call the moorland, which was volcanic rock, and those bushes. So it was a mixture, and right off the bat, you're going through all this again. And so my shoulder is wide awake within the first few steps of the start line because you're shifting over this terrain. I was mentally, it was, this has got to end. It's kind of like being deployed. I was in and out of Bosnia a few times. You were mentioning a deployment. There's only 24 hours in a day, right? So this is going to end at some point, and I just dove into, the first bit of this with right back into the absolute worst conditions. It at least wasn't snowing, and it was warming up a little bit. The further north we went, the wind never relented, but the weather conditions, at least it was sunny and it was getting a little bit warmer. I didn't have 3 layers of clothes on, and a windbreak or a rain top, to get through. But the lava rock, the shrubs, and the trying not to fall off these mounds so that you could just walk on top of them because that saved energy, or kind of jump from top to top. It was just hard. It was just hard to get through it. I never fell. As a matter of fact, my first good trip came right after that, because right after that checkpoint, we got onto a 4-wheel drive track, a very rough 4-wheel drive track, was, just two tire tracks, down the road, but it was wide enough that you could run. Not fast, but you could move. And I was much more comfortable running down those tire tracks than anything else. But there was a lot of rock in there too, and my feet were already beat up. That I could tell that I was getting really tired from the lack of sleep, because I started tripping on some of these rocks. The fireman from New York, Jonathan, he had tripped and he went past me. Serious athlete, but he went past me and his knee was all bloody where he had hit the ground. But he was moving too. But I tripped shortly after, and it was because I was messing with my pack and trying to get it comfortable. I didn't fall, but it was probably, I don't know how I didn't fall with the weight of that pack pushing me forward. But I was really just happy to be on that 4-wheel drive track, and you could stay on that track pretty much all day long until we started seeing the steam from the sulfur that was coming up out of the ground. I don't know what you call those, but we ran through. It was kind of weird because it's a big. They have a hot springs there, and then you've got these, like, I don't know what to call them other than where the steam is coming up from the ground, and it's all over the place, and the dirt is yellow. It smells horrible, but there's tourists everywhere. And we had to not only navigate all the steam and everything that was coming up out of the ground, but we had to navigate around all the tourists that were there. And I thought, again, we were tourists, visitors to these big, this hot springs area with all the sulfur and stuff that's coming out of the ground. But I didn't expect that I was going to have to go up and over this mountain that I was looking at. I thought we were going to end somewhere near this spring, and that was not the case. So I had another 10 kilometers up and over this mountain, and it traveled along this road, and you could see a lake, Mavaton, I think it's called, out in the distance. But day 5 was not a bad day. It just started bad with the terrain. But once we were on that 4-wheel drive track, it got significantly better and faster, right, because I could move.
Now, at the end of day 5, you get done with the 24 miles, you get some sleep, and the same conditions as normal, right?
And it got better. It got better, yeah. So it was like Christmas. So at 7:00, provided everyone was done by 7, they were taking us to the hot springs.
Ooh.
And so one of the requirements in our drop bag was a bathing suit and a towel. And so we had an opportunity to actually get a shower before we got into the hot springs. And so it was nice to get cleaned up a little bit. And that gave us 2 hours of sitting in really warm water and getting everything massaged. It was really wicked cold, though, getting out of that water and then getting dressed. But
it was worth it.
It was worth it, however, now all of your bandages and everything that you had on your feet are now loosened, and so is the skin and everything else, and now you have to have it all redressed again. And the doctors were very, very busy that night. And luckily, one of my tent mates is a Canadian Army doctor, and he was dealing with his, and I had given him a little bit of grief on day 2 because he had a blister and he went to go see the doctors. And I said, "You're a doctor. Why are you going to go see a doctor to fix a blister?" And anyway, he needed to prove to me that he was a legitimate doctor. And he said, "Let me take care of your blisters." And that's where, I've got a picture. He had some needles and he's popping a blister that I didn't even know that I had. And he taped my feet because, day 6 was, even though it was a short day, I knew it was going to be just as challenging as every other day that we had. And it was. It was good he did a phenomenal job of taping my feet.
Wow. Now, you get to day 6, you wake up on day 6. According to the little documentary I saw, there's a lot of flies around on the last day. Is this the same thing here, or is this a different terrain?
No, there were a lot of flies, midges, and they are buzzing everywhere. They weren't as bad as I thought they were going to be, but they were definitely in your face, in your eyes, in your ears, just buzzing all around. They get between, your face and your sunglasses. They recommended that you brought like a mosquito net to go over your head. I actually pulled mine out at one point, just to get some relief. But yeah, there were a bunch of flies.
Wow. Now, as far as the weather, it's still freezing cold outside, lots of wind, and now then you have to go embark on this last 12-mile run?
Yeah, it was 19 kilometers, 12 miles. Yeah. It was a beautiful sunny day. It was in the 30s, maybe even 40 degrees because we're further north now. But probably, in my opinion, it was the windiest day of all.
Really?
That we had. And this is when I said earlier, this was the only place that I've ever been in my life, and I've been all over the world, that no matter what direction I was moving, the wind was always in my face. It was incredible. North, south, east, or west, it didn't matter. It was, you were running into it. I would have killed to be, have the wind at my back for a while. And day 6 was nothing but hills, up and down, with a little bit of lava fields and bushes, or what they called the crags. You really needed to be cognizant of when you were going along the lowland area. There were some gaping holes in the earth, and they tried to mark those as best they could so you wouldn't fall in those. But it was a lot of undulating terrain through the grass and the sand. You hit some lava fields, but it was mostly up and down hills. It started right off the bat, from the camp of 5, probably within 100 meters, you were going uphill.
Wow.
And it was all day up and down hills.
Jesus. Now, to fast forward just a little bit here,
Mm-hmm.
did you have expectations of what the finish line might really look like coming through the golf course?
Did not. I saw the golf course and I knew that I was getting close, but then it quickly disappeared. And I was going down a hill and then up another one. I was crossing some farmland. I saw a couple of mountain bikers up there. I only glimpsed the golf course once, and that was, I don't know how far away from the finish it was, but it still took, a good 30 minutes, 45 minutes maybe to get to the finish line from when I saw the putting green for one of the holes. But, and it was, for me, it was kind of strange that they would actually have a golf course that high up, because we're literally, it's hill running, but these are significant hills. They're not, these little speed bump things. These are, and this is not going to help you on your podcast, but I don't know if you can see this or not, but this is the elevation. Yeah, it's significant. It's not a joke, what you're going up and down. But I did not anticipate the finish line at all. Like I said, there are 22 countries represented out of the 63 people that showed up. You're coming down this hill, and you see the flags marking the trail, and I never saw all the country flags. And I've seen the videos enough, and maybe I was just too tired that I forgot. But I came around the corner and I saw every nation's flag that was represented planted in the ground there. Like I said, the crew knows you. They know everybody very, very well. And you come around the corner, and my buddy Alan, my gear check guy, and the guy that made me go back out for another 20 kilometers across country, and I hated him, hands me the American flag and says, "Well done." And then he said, "Go finish your race." And that was a little overwhelming. And then, all these people are there, not a huge crowd or anything, but I mean, a lot of competitors who had already finished, some families that flew over from Europe or wherever they came from to, see their significant others, finish. They all stayed, and it was cool. And the race director's there, and he's got this big honking medal, and there's Joran standing there, his wife, and she's told me the same thing she told me every day. "Well done, Tom." She said that every day for 6 days straight. And every time I saw her, every checkpoint, everything was well done. And it was cool. It was very cool. And my tent mates that finished before me were standing there, waiting for me to come through. It was great. It was really a different experience, different from the multi-day race that I had done in England, which was an awesome event back in May. But this one was just a whole nother level.
Wow. So did you have emotions here?
Oh, hell yeah.
So you're
oh, yeah. Man. Yeah, I'm a retired combat arms officer, and a marching band, the American flag or whatever, that'll put me in tears. And finishing that, and the race director giving me a big old hug and putting it's a freaking dessert plate, that medal around my neck, and I'm holding the American flag, and everyone's, nice job. Yeah, I'm glad I had sunglasses on. Absolutely glad I had sunglasses on. And I was really proud of, my friend Wendy, who finished, was super happy, and Sharon, the lady from, Scotland, and the lady that I told you about earlier that broke her leg. And then I don't know if I told you, so she broke her leg 2 years ago. And then, on another one, she came back over and tried for a second time, and they, had over 20 people, get hypothermia. Did I tell you that? Yeah. And sorry. And anyway, so she was over there for her third try, and man, I have an amazing amount of respect for this lady. But seeing her come across the line, and finally finishing it after 3 tries. And she's done races all over the world, but this one just gave her a hard time for whatever reason. But, it was really cool to see him finish.
Well, Tom, we covered quite a bit about your race. We went in depth on every day. What else do you want to add about your race? I cannot say enough about the race director, the crew that were out there, how simple it was to get on a plane, compete, and come home. Everything was to a T taken care of. It was worth the money. The experience, I've never been challenged like that in my life. And I have had absolutely every emotion since finishing. And I probably had more emotion since finishing because I've done this for 9 months. This is all I've done. I've worked, I've slept, I've eaten, and I've trained for 9 months. I had 1,920 training miles before I ever towed the line in Iceland that I did here before I got on that plane. Until we started this podcast, I didn't know where I finished. I finished 24th overall. It took me a little over 37 hours to do it, 250 kilometers, and I'm okay with that. Given what I know that I went through, the terrain and the weather conditions, I'm okay that it took that long. Because, I've done other races 100 miles and it's taken me less than 24. This isn't other races. So I think if people want a challenge, and they want an extreme, and they want an environment that cannot be replicated anywhere else in the world, this is your race. Wow. So, Tom, I only have 2 more questions to kind of wrap up here. And the first one being, how can athletes follow you?
I'm not sure they want to, but I've never had anybody ask me that before. I do have an Instagram that I don't really post a ton on, and I have my Facebook. The only reason I have Instagram was for fundraising. I used it for a cancer research project that I did a few years ago, and this one. So I really don't know if there's really any following to do.
Okay. So what's next for you?
What's next? I'm taking 12 weeks off, so to speak.
Off?
So to speak, off. I'm going to play a little bit. I'm going to just do some fun runs. Yesterday, I ran the mountaintops here in Anchorage, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And I'm just going to continue to play a little bit, but I really want to get back into the gym and put on some of that muscle mass that I lost. I am registered for the Thames 100 in England for May 4th, which is a 100-mile single-day race along the Thames from London to Oxford University. I'm doing that because of I met some friends on previous races, multi-stage race and a cross-country race that I did in England. But anyway, the Thames 100, and I'm looking for another stage race.
Okay.
Right now.
What races are on your bucket list then?
I think that's been part of what's been so hard about this transition. Fire and ice has been something for 5 years that I've wanted to do. I've done it, and now I really don't have anything on my bucket list, so I need to find one. I don't think an Alaskan is going to do great in the Sahara or the Gobi Desert, so I really have no desire to try those. I do want to run in Switzerland. I do want to. There's a race in Albania that's put on by Global Limits. It's a multi-day stage race about the same distance. That looks interesting, but I really don't have one that excited me or excites me as much as Fire and Ice did.
Wow. So, Tom, it's been a pleasure talking with you. And to conclude this episode, I have to ask the question that I ask everybody, and that's, what's your definition of a perfect race?
Wow. You should have given me this as a read ahead. My definition of a perfect race is, I think a perfect race is a race that challenges you and you feel like you've accomplished something at the end of it. I am a firm believer in comparison is the thief of joy. So I don't worry about who's on my right and who's on my left. I worry about me. And if I know that I put 100% into a particular effort and I cross that line, then it's a perfect race. I have never had a race pan out the way I had planned it. There's always something out there that I didn't plan for. It's happened before in the desert. It's happened in England. It's happened in Iceland, and it's happened even at the Chicago Marathon. But I've finished each one. I've never DNF'd a race. So for me, crossing the line, and being happy with my accomplishment, and knowing that I put the effort into that accomplishment, I'm okay with that.
Wow. Well, Tom, thank you so much for spending some time with me. It's going to be a really long episode, but, this is just so amazing. I've taken so many notes on this, and after your next stage race, I would welcome you back to share about your next experience, because this is just so amazing to hear about your journey through this. I mean, you just started this 5 years ago doing marathons and half marathons, and now then you're doing things that would challenge even the seasoned triathlete and endurance athlete to the limits, and you're passing those limits with somewhat of an ease. And I like this. This is really knowledgeable, and I've learned a lot from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. This is the first podcast I've ever done, so I apologize for any awkwardness or anything in this.
It's okay.
But I hope there's some value in it. I mean, my whole thing is I'm 54. Doing this, being in the weight room or pounding out miles is kind of my way of flipping off getting older. I've got a 21-year-old kid in the military, and I just want to be a good example. And I don't want, to not experience life. So that's kind of why I do this. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
it does. And I can relate to that a little bit. Well, that's all I have, Tom. And I would
All right, sir.
welcome you back to come back on soon or after your next race in May.
All right. Thanks. Be well. Peace.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.